And you're very welcome to the Racing Room with AK Bets. A bit of an unusual show this week. We've no Harry Stewart Moore. He's off catching pheasants around his big estate that he's able to buy after his very successful appeal road last week. So it's Anthony AK Bets Kaminskis, it's Tony Calvin, myself, and we're delighted to be joined by Paul Struthers, of course, Chief Executive of the Professional Jockeys Association. Paul, it's great to have you, first of all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me on.
I'm going to go straight into it, and I want an honest and a direct answer on this question, if you don't mind. And I'm sorry to start with this, but what NFL team do you support?
Washington.
Washington, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're an NFL fan. Yeah, I am myself as well. So it's nice.
Yeah, huge. And so don't tell me what happened, because I got to within about 2 minutes of the end of the game, and yeah, we just scored a touchdown, so we were 5 points behind. So I'll watch the last 2 minutes without knowing what happened. But yeah, we were in for an embarrassing defeat to our hated rivals, the Cowboys, who've been useless, and we made them look quite good.
Dallas are used at the moment. Do you watch the? I promise I won't spend too long on this for racing fans. Do you watch the red zone? I find the red zone, like, it's great in one sense, but also it's kind of a sensory overload. It's just everything coming at you at a million miles an hour, and I can't take it all in, to be honest with you.
It's perfect for someone with ADHD tendencies like I have. So I love red zone. Just flitting between all the best bits. So instead of just changing channels and flitting on Game Pass between the various games that are going on, especially when Washington, as has been the case for the last 10 years, been awful.
Yeah,
that's 90% of our listeners gone already.
Yeah, I reckon you would have made a good front line there, TC, defending the quarterback there, just protecting him from all harm coming loose. What do you reckon?
The worst sport ever. I cannot get involved into it. I cannot stand that sport. I think it's rubbish.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Honestly, I was saying to Paul before we started here, if they were playing in the back garden, I'd shut the curtains and call the guards. I think it's so boring. For me, everyone in our office is into it. All people my age in Ireland seem to be into it. I just can't get into it at all.
Have you given it the time, AK? Have you actually sat down and given it time?
I usually get to half time in the Super Bowl and then think I shouldn't do this again next year. It's that bad. I just can't get into it. Yeah.
Well, TC's a rugby man. Paul, you and I can talk NFL all night, but look, we're here to talk racing, so look, we'll get into it. How have the last few months been for you, just generally, in your position? There's been a lot of controversy. It seems like, every week on the podcast here, there's a story with negative connotations here, and not to kind of be doom and gloom about it too much because you're here, but how have the last few weeks been, as far as you're concerned, for jockeys and for racing in general?
I do love that, though. I don't want to be all doom and gloom because you're here. That's
my job. Yeah.
Look, it's always busy, and racing, the nature of the sport is kind of prone to creating whether you want to call it bad news or just kind of newsworthy happenings, because it's a sport that involves horses and things go wrong in it. There's been a lot going on, it's as you'd expect, been particularly busy the last 5-6 weeks because of obviously the David Power Jockey Cup. So we worked with RMG and with Flutter to get that off the ground in a very short space of time. So that's taken up a lot of work, and just the day job, and as well, and I'm sure we'll come on to this during the program, that there's a lot going on just in racing generally and around the governance of racing and the health of racing. So the PJA stuff, and whilst jockeys are getting suspended all the time, etc., it's going well from a PJA perspective. I'm more concerned about the wider health of the sport and some of the changes that really need to start happening quickly, because racing's inability to change and adapt over the last 25 years has led us to where we are. So that is taking up a lot of time and effort, not just from me, but of other members of the Thoroughbred group as well.
Yeah, and we can understand that perfectly here. I mean, look, we do spend a disproportionately large amount of time talking about the negative side of the sport. And I guess, look, a podcast lends itself to that. Like, if everything was going great the whole time, nobody would want to listen to us because we're the most moany bunch of lads you'd ever meet. So like, it lends itself to a good old yarn. But I guess, when you dig down a bit, and you kind of try and understand the people inside, how they feel about the industry, I guess it's a sport that invites a lot of opinion, Paul. And that's good, in certain regards, but also the opinion doesn't stop at this is where I want to put my money. People have an opinion on all aspects.
But that's a good thing, isn't it? Generally, insofar as once you are into racing, it's probably one of the sports that's the kind of politics and business side of the sport is more obviously linked to more in the news than in other sports, really, where you're watching the sport. And yeah, so I must be a masochist doing this job and then football refereeing. So I referee football on a Saturday and Sunday. So, obviously refereeing is a big issue in football, but you don't really massively see a massive amount of narrative around football business. There obviously are, and there's obviously some excellent football business journalists. But I think racing, once it grips you fully, doesn't it? And then, you are going to get people with opinions, but that's why people are so passionate about the sport. And without that passion, where are you as a sport? I think we should value that passion.
Do you think jockeys are in a good place at the moment? Are they happy with how things are at the moment? And I say this because every week we're talking about, a large ban being picked up for. Well, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but how do they feel the sport is progressing at the moment? Are they happy with how they are being adjudicated, looked upon, and evaluated?
Yes and no would be the answer if they're happy or not. I think there'd be a lot of jockeys that would share the concerns about the wider health of the sport. And particularly issues that have been in the news again this week around prize money and racecourse contributions to prize money and what they're putting in and what they're not. There is concern around that. Their lives are definitely harder since the closure of saunas, combined with the removal of what was at the time the COVID allowance. So their lives are harder in that regard. But despite all that, they are what I would call in pretty good form. I mean, this time of year for the flat jockeys, we've obviously had a lot of flat jockeys that aren't here for the winter. They go and ply their trade overseas. So we lose a decent number of jockeys there. And plying your trade as a flat jockey in the winter is a grind.
Yeah.
We've moved increasingly away from afternoon all-weather fixtures to twilight and evening fixtures. No one likes those.
No.
From the kind of, for want of a better expression, from the supply side. And it's cold and they're struggling to make weight. So it's really challenging. But despite all that, and despite the suspensions and the concerns about the sport generally, all told, they're not in bad form, as it were.
I was TC. I had Racing TV on Friday evening. I was doing my usual lucky 15 in Dundalk, which I just have too much money and I want to get rid of it. So backing horses in Dundalk is a surefire way to do it. But anyway, it switched between Dundalk and Dubai, and Ben Cohen had a winner over for one of the prominent owners. I can't remember who, but I remember him getting his first ride for Johnny Murtagh, and I was going, Jesus, Ben Cohen, summer in Ireland, winter in Dubai. That is the life for me. What do you reckon, TC?
The only Ben Cohen I know is an England winger. I don't think I've ever watched Dundalk on a Friday. You must be diseased. You.
Listen. Few pints on a Friday night and just throw a few darts at the old board. Sure, look, that's where AK makes his money.
not on course, we don't.
Yeah, listen, look, we'll come back into maybe the jockeys a little bit later on, Paul, if you don't mind. But it was a very busy weekend, racing-wise, TC. Some really good results if you're a fan of Brighter Days Ahead. If you think State Man is a bang average who's been kind of plodding around and picking up lots of prize money, But look, I thought it was an interesting weekend overall. The Betfair Chase as well. Royal Pagaille, who I thought was a grade 3 handicapper in the making, goes and does it twice in a row. I know nothing about racing, TC. Nothing.
No, it's brilliant weekends of racing. We can be positive here for once. Start off by giving Ascot a mention. They offered free kind of like
Entry.
Admission.
It's been a long day. Free entry on the
You
Friday.
haven't had your 4 bottles of wine, TC. That's what's wrong with you.
No, and I just said before we come in, I'm literally just had my first sip of wine on a Sunday. So these 9 o'clock starts are not good.
I made myself a hot whiskey here to get the call. Go on, yeah.
Red Bull.
Yeah, so they had free admission on the Friday. I think they had 9,000 take up on that. So that's very good for them. On the track, it was brilliant, wasn't it? The Betfair was a little bit unedifying because it was a slow motion finish, but it was made a very, very good spectacle from the Rich Ritchie interview afterwards on ITV, when literally he choked up. He wasn't as lost for words as I just was then, but yeah, he was very emotional there, and obviously Royal Pagaille was his 100th Grade 1 winner.
I mean, 100 Grade 1s as an owner, Tony. That is some going, isn't it?
Like, I know him quite well, and he was, although he didn't respond to my text I sent him on Saturday. So
he probably changed phones since he got 16 million pounds from that company he invested in last week.
Yeah. So no, he's great. I mean, if you could bottle his enthusiasm for the sport and sell it, racing wouldn't have any problems whatsoever. He's the kind of guy who you'd have to put 2 zeros on the kind of like on the money that you need to chuck at him to get it, but he'd be great for one of those kind of like chairman stroke CEO roles in racing. But like
still think I'd rather have your hair, TC, anyway.
Oh yeah,
I was just going to say, if you could bottle his hairdo, TC, he'd be a handsome man.
But look, if you're a billionaire, you can do what you want. You can wear your hair whatever you want.
Correct.
It's like I always say about Andrew Black and stuff like that. I mean, some of the states he's turned up for. I remember him. I think I might have told the story before. Actually, he turned up for the Oaks at Epsom one day, and we got a call to the Betfair box saying, "Can you come down here? There's a very scruffy man who doesn't meet any kind of like requirements of dress." So we know who it was, and he went down there. He was wearing sandals, no socks, shorts, and a Betfair fleece with his breakfast down the front.
That's the AK Bet's dress code, basically.
That is, yeah. Does he want a job?
Yeah. So yeah, when you're that rich, you can do what you want. You can wear what you want, and you can have a hair. Well, I can have a haircut. Well, actually, I probably could grow out of the back, but it might take a while. What else do we have on the track? Obviously you mentioned State Man getting beaten by Brighter Days Ahead.
How good is she a contender, do you think, in the champion hurdle division, TC, or do you think maybe State Man needed a run and this is maybe not the result? How do you judge that?
She had a race. State Man traded, I think, 10s on when going to last, and just got out bad by a race fit rival. Yeah. But even though Brighter Days Ahead won that race, Gordon Elliott's come out and said they're going to aim towards the Mayor's Hurdle. So you're going to get, imagine in the next few days, people screaming about, why didn't you ditch the Mayor's Hurdle? But yeah, that was a good performance. Like I said, about that Royal Pagaille, I mean, it was a really good result. But it was a bit unedifying. It was like, desperate ground. They were finishing legless. At one stage, Brave Man's Game was literally, I thought, was going to be pulled up. He actually stayed on to be third, not being that far in the end. So that gives you an idea. They all stopped there. But they weren't in the John Durkan. The John Durkan was a great, well, you were there presenting for RTE.
Back to file.
It was a brilliant race.
Amazing.
I think Anthony's got some betting insight on this.
Did you take much money on the race, AK?
Yeah, it's probably the betting race of the weekend, to be honest with you, especially on track. One thing I'd say about Punchestown, I wasn't there today. Our turnover numbers aren't anything outstanding. I think I actually went on Saturday, so I was meeting up with a few people for a couple of hours basically on Saturday afternoon. And I know they had the weather warnings and there might have been a preliminary inspection on Saturday morning, but the crowd was relatively light and the bet was relatively light as well. Probably the John Durkan was probably the race of from a betting point of view, just really, really interesting. Fast or slow, some faces in the ring, and even just myself seeing a bit of order flow outside of the ring. Plenty of the right faces, and we're essentially lumping on. Factor File was basically the one that was just absolutely dead in the market. No takers whatsoever. I think you would look.
What was your SP5, if you don't mind me asking? Sorry, was Fast or Slow the SP favorite or Factor Five? How did it work out in the end? Do you know? Can you remember?
It would have been. I've not actually seen the SP, but just from a betting point of view, I basically had a look a couple of minutes before the off. In fact, if I was basically an 11-2 shot, 5-1, 11-2 shot, but then it'd be really, really interesting to see. I've obviously seen the SP, and it's really hardened up right on the off, contrary to probably every single piece of business prior to that minute. We've not seen it on course. We've probably not really seen it on course, but the industry's massively moved, literally at the death in that race. And it's just, if there was one race where I could literally see order flow between online, who was playing behind the exchanges, versus what was happening at the track and with other online bookmakers, it'd be really, really interesting, I think, because that horse there wasn't a penny for it. And should I see some order flow from off course as well, even outside of our business, should we say? And there basically was not a penny for it. And then it's really, really hard. And I think it's a real good case of potentially what we were talking about, where it's basically somebody stepped in there at the last minute and really shortened that up. Probably been nobody talking about that. But from my point of view, I'd be really, really and I'll never see it, but I would have been really interested to see what was happening there in the last minute or two prior to the off, basically betting wise.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, and TC, just to bring in on this, but like Factor File, I remember watching Cheltenham last year and watching him win and go, holy shit, this horse is incredible. Jumping, galloping, engine, the whole lot. And there was very little said about him this week. It was all, would Galloping Deshaun make it? Fast or Slow defending champion. He was the quiet horse, but like as AK said, somebody stepped in and said, like, this horse is really...
It was interesting. I mean, we've touched upon this before. I mean, you can move a market in the dying moments for half the money that it used to be. I mean, the liquidity on the exchange Betfair is down massively. And it happened in the Betfair Chase actually as well. When Grey Dawning at one moment was trading at 5-2, 11-4 on the exchange, and the next moment it was a point shorter, and that was literally on the off in the last minute or so.
Yeah.
So obviously,
and it was the flip side of that for Robert Guy as well, to be honest.
Yeah. That was going to go off favourite 2 minutes beforehand, and that would turn an SP of 11-4. I mean, today Fast or Slow was 6-4. Factor File got backed into 7-2 right at the off. So it's just the late moves. I mean, you can move a market for pretty little money at the moment. But no, that was a great race. You can make a case for 4 or 5 of them. You know, obviously that was only over 2 mile 4 today, so you've got another 6 furlongs plus to go in the Gold Cup. So, but yeah, a great start for Factor File, and that is now the favourite for the Gold Cup.
Wow.
What else do we have this? Yeah. What else do we have? Pick Dory's going to go for the King George, but that literally beat 128 rated chasers. So I think that's pretty much pie in the sky.
Yeah. Go for the King George all you like.
Yeah. Well, I can see why they would do, because obviously, as we've mentioned, with Fast or Slow not being in there at the moment, I wouldn't have thought they'd be supplemented on the back of that run today. But who knows? That's falling apart a little bit with Ile Francais blowing out in France as well. We should mention the Japan Cup. I don't know if you saw some of the stuff on X and Twitter about some of the coverage of the Japan Cup and the crowds. It was unbelievable. We talk about the Cheltenham Roar. I mean, this was a real whale all the way through from all up the straight. I mean, they're amazing, amazing fans out there, and we saw the back of Auguste Rodin there. So yeah, that's.
I know Aidan O'Brien travelled over for the first time there. I spent 2.5 months in Japan for the Rugby World Cup in 2019, and it is an amazing country, and they talk about embracing sport, occasion, whatever it is. They just go full. Paul, have you ever been to Japan? Have you ever been?
I've never been, unfortunately. I know the jockeys who ride there. So I know Tom's there at the moment, and Holly, if she's not there, will be going. They love it. They love riding there. And there are challenges because the jockeys get sequestered. I think it's 72 hours before a race meeting. They're no contact with the outside world, but they love it. They say the fandom, and it's proper fandom, which you don't often see in racing at all. You'll see it occasionally with the odd horse, but the fandom over there of the jockeys and the horses is like nowhere else in the world.
Like they really just embrace whatever the occasion. They just really get behind it, and it's only kind of when you're there and you see it and you kind of feel and I don't know, like I'm the most cynical guy in the world, right? But
hang on, we've got some rivals here. Come on.
Well, listen, this is a cynical podcast, but like you can't help but just be taken up by it. They really. There's something genuine about the Japanese, particularly around sporting events. I'm not going to speak for everything. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Reimel's always banged on about him. He's been going over there for years, and I remember him telling me about even if you go on a Tuesday to a meeting on dirt somewhere, and they've got kind of like local grade 1s and grade 2s. Some of the money they're racing for out there is well, obviously they've got it sussed with what they do over there. But yeah, I get the impression that they love the sport rather than they love the betting, which is probably arse about face.
But then again, from a betting point of view, I think I've been in Shartin and Happy Valley a good few times now. I think I've been to Shartin for the big meeting there 4 or 5 times. And obviously we talk about turnover with torts and stuff like that, and we mention Hong Kong frequently in relation to that, but turnover on some of these Japanese races, from memory a couple of years ago, you'd be talking like 5-10x what they'd be turning over on the big races in Hong Kong. Like, it's absolutely astronomical from memory, even though I haven't seen this year's figures or anything like that. It's unbelievable money. And then another thing, the winner, I think, actually was even just saw myself when I woke up in the morning, and I knew we were 7-2 the winner all day yesterday, and then going to bed for me we were 7-2, and then I woke up and saw the racing post SP of like 13-10, and I was like, oh god, what have we done in here, like, sort of thing. So like they tend to this is real anecdotal with absolutely no evidence behind it, but when they tend to the SPs on their tour tend to reflect what happens in the bigger races, to be honest with you, because your massive prices that might have been 12s, 14s in the UK going off 100 on the tour and getting absolutely trounced, basically. So
yeah, well, Paul, can I ask you? And this might be a little bit of a strange question, but like as regards racing, like, do you see racing through the prism of and because you have a relationship with the jockeys, and because, like, obviously it's your job as well to ensure that they're all looked after, but like through that you must develop relationships. Do you see races now through the prism of the horse or the jockey? Like, I mean, if you get me, can you separate the two? Do you have an interest? If you understand what I'm trying to ask you.
No, it's a really good question. So my answer would be it depends. I won't say, but when I was unemployed, so when I left the PJ last time and I was out of work for a long time, I kind of fell out of love with the sport. I didn't watch it. I've always had this answer, don't bet what you can't afford to lose. So wasn't betting on the sport, had no interest. I think I went racing in the whole 18 months that I wasn't working in racing twice. Wow. And one of the times I left halfway through the day because I was just so not enjoying it. And by this point, I've been unemployed for like 15 months. So it was just like, oh God, I don't want to be here. So I don't bet much at all anymore on racing, but that's not a negative about racing. It's just you got out of the habit, and comes back to NFL as well. That I do.
Yeah.
I enjoy betting on the NFL. Yes. So no, but I can still watch racing. Like, I was watching racing yesterday, so like the King George. I disagree with you, Tony. I get what you're saying about, it was really, really, really soft ground, and a number of horses were pulled up. But as much as I'm not a massive fan of the current incarnation of the whip rules, I think they do at least play a part, and you could really see it on yesterday, that I didn't find it an unedifying spectacle as a result. I just found it a fascinating battle between two really brave horses that was changing in nature after the second last. And then it looks like Harry's come to win his race, and then the horse runs down, and then Charlie battles back. So yeah, I'm watching that, just watching the horses. I did actually. I backed the French horse, so I was getting excited at the top of the straight, and that quickly vanished. But I was watching that at the end because I was loving that as a horse race. But then you're then going, I mean, Charlie, just one of the nicest, gentlest, funniest fellas you could ever meet. And then after you've watched it and you're then just really pleased for him. And then, like you said, Tony, Rich Ritchie's reaction and stuff afterwards. I just thought that was as much as I take your point about it being so heavy. I just thought that was jump racing at its absolute best.
Maybe the identifying line was a bit strong, but if you put that at Bangor on a Wednesday, people will be saying it's only because of the nature of the horses involved. If you, like I said, if that was a midweek fixture and you saw them pretty much, stopping to a walk as Grey Dawning did after last, you would have said, yeah, that was tough viewing. But it's because of the horses involved. And it would have taken a lot out of it. I think Dan Skelton said afterwards, you won't be seeing Grey Dawning for 2-3 months. Because that would have, first time out in that kind of test, it would have pretty much bottomed them. But
we'll probably see Constitution Hill before we see Grey Dawning.
Yeah, we'll come on to him in a moment, but we'll finish the racing with you, but we've got to make
yes. Can I ask you, Ballyburn, is he your idea of the Arkle winner? TC, I like a short price fab, mate. Come on, give me some good vibes here.
Still have the Turners. It'd be odds on for the Turners.
Yeah, but he's got to go for one.
I don't massively having pegged as a 2-miler.
Did you see a couple of flaws in his jumping? Is that like?
No, not really. Obviously he won the Gallagher over 2 mile 5 at Cheltenham, even though that horse that kind of race does throw up 2-milers. He probably will stay 3 miles. He obviously has got 2 mile speed. I think he beats Slade Steele over 2 miles. But like, the intermediate distance for the Turners would have been ideal for him, but we haven't got that race anymore, so they're going to have to go 2 or 3 miles.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I thought he was very good, I have to say. Yeah, no, I thought he was very good. Okay. Right. Paul, let's talk about the David Power Flutter 500,000 Jockeys Bonanza. I'd rather win this than the Jockeys Title Award here. Look, I can perfectly understand a jockey saying, hang on a second, you're telling me if I win this David Power Cup, I get €500,000, and if I win the Jockeys Title of the season, I get a hell of a lot less than that. I can perfectly understand, and I admire somebody who comes out and says, sorry, this is what I want to win. You can keep your title over here, but I'm a professional jockey. This is how I earn my money. I have a family to look after. I have whatever commitments. I think great. I'm delighted he said it. I don't know what your thoughts is on it, but I think it's great. I think it's fantastic.
I agree. It's Harry's, as we saw in Champions Full Gallop. He's a really interesting interview. He comes across so well. He's thoughtful and he's eloquent. So it doesn't surprise me him saying that at all. I do wonder whether be interesting if he'd not been champion jockey yet, whether his attitude would be quite the same. Because I know for Sean, whilst the prizes are incredibly valuable and tempting, Sean wants to be champion jockey, and
I'd say he wants that 500 large more.
Yeah, and your ideal if you're Sean is that you're going to be able to do both. And there's every chance he can genuinely go for both of them. But the money's huge. It's new money into the sport. I think some of the criticism of it, which was always to be anticipated, missed that point. This wasn't the 7-figure sum being taken out of the levy that could have gone into prize money. This is a new initiative with a significant investment from a sponsor in Flutter. I know Flutter, they don't just chuck money around randomly. They're not doing this as they want to respect and David Power being the title was super, super important to them. But they're doing this and hoping this is going to get a return on their investment based on their customer research and their insight into their users. And
my point last week, Paul, sorry to cut across you, but my point to the lads here was it's great for the jockeys, and I understand that. And I completely understand that. And fair play to Harry. I thought it was great that he said it. And I can totally understand, their focus and why it's a good thing in their little sphere and their little bubble. It's great. Like for the wider racing fan, I don't get the appeal of this. Like I don't see how this does anything except help the jockeys who do well in it. I don't see.
Just before we go back to Paul, mate, I think Flutter have kind of like, as we mentioned last week, we just said, look, if they're putting all this money in, it's like I say, it's not coming out of the sports coffers. Great. If they're putting money into the sport instead of
it's the money that they had for you to pay UTC when you effect off. So like that's
I haven't got my severance payments yet. So yeah. But I don't suppose I will be. Anyway, but my issue was, everybody that you speak to, when I mentioned last week that the people at ITV, it was sprung on them kind of like the week before. But, they're not going to say no because they're getting the benefits of that deal. One of the things that Fluttership said, everyone, it's kind of like an open secret that jockeys have said to have bought into this so much. And doing the stuff like Harry going on the opening show and Nico going on ATR's online stuff. They are going to come out and do more press and media, which everyone will benefit.
Yeah,
I think a large part of this that I think they should have come out and said straight away is they're doing this for a variety of reasons. It's not just the 500 grand, the 200 grand a second, the 100 grand for third. They're doing it to enhance the sport as a whole in the media, in their media profiles. And a lot of people are saying that on the back of this, there's going to be a full gallop champions too, and jockey's going to be mic'd up a lot more. They're going to be doing a lot more promotion of the sport. I think if that was said at launch, it may or may not be true, but I'd bet tens on they're going to get a new series on the back of this. If they'd have said that, people just thought, you're chucking money at the bigger jockeys. I mean, there are money all the way down to the end, and I think the conditionals get there. So I think that's what they should have done there is. And also, one of the questions I was going to ask you, Paul, obviously, it's only all this 1.5, 1.4 million is going to go to the top jockeys because it's obviously ITV races, etc. Did you have any of your membership say to you, I'm a journeyman, I need it more than Cobden 500 grand, I need it more than Skelton, I need it more than Sean Bowen, I need it more than Nico de Boinville? Why wasn't there a more tiered structure to get more money to the bottom end where they need it more, where they need it most?
Yeah, a very valid question, and the answer is very simply yes. So that was the response. I can talk about this and give some insight into everything you've said if you want, because this all happened really quite quickly. It's a concept that's been mooted for a year or two, and I know there'd been presentations given at various committees about it, and then I was approached around a month before launch. And knowing that this was an idea, and if it was going to happen, it was launching at Cheltenham's open meeting. So I was going, that's 4 weeks. That's not long. This is going to take some getting across the line, because it's going to take getting our jockeys across the line. But we did, and it was hectic and it was long weeks. But credit to my role was simply we did manage to negotiate. So there are wider benefits. So if you look at the prizes, and obviously 500,000 to the winner is a huge sum of money that was always going to cause some people to react badly to it because it's so much. But if you come 10th, and certainly realistically, the top 3 placings, probably at most half a dozen jockeys, barring injury, half a dozen jockeys can win those top 3 prizes. No one's naive to that. But those lower prizes are still significant. So if you come 10th, and those prizes, when you look at past year's modelling, they're going to a much broader range of jockeys. And jockeys, and it's very, I looked at last year's modelling, and for that 10th spot, there were a swathe of jockeys that were within a few points either side of 10th. And to win 10 grand as a jockey, you are winning a race that has a total value of probably around 150 to 175,000 pounds.
Yeah.
That is still a significant sum. And then you're right, TC, in that the whilst the prizes are significant and they go towards this, the media commitments and some of the new initiatives that jockeys will be partaking in are significant. And you're only just starting to see that because it happened it's so quickly in the space of a month. And that's why, you know, if you've heard ITV didn't hear about it until a week to 2 weeks before, that wouldn't surprise me given those timescales. But there are up to 25 jockeys that are specifically signed up to these media commitments. And it's a list of 15 different ones, and some of those only kick in at certain times of the year if you're in the top 10. But what you will see as we progress through this, you'll see way more use of Jockey Cam, which I think is only a good thing, because the footage you get on that, and other countries, despite it being founded in Britain and being a British company, other countries have run with it way more than we have in this country.
Nathan Horrocks is going to get 500 grand then by the sounds of it.
So you're going to see that. You'll see a lot more jockeys in action. They've got some various initiatives that aren't ready yet, but will be trialed on course and then rolled out on course. So you've got that. We're receiving some funding that we will be putting into our mental health support, which is really, really important for the jockeys with sporting chance. And we're looking to actually enhance that support structure even more. And
especially now with the amount of bans that are handed out, Paul. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And then there's some other additional money that we've received that we will find a way to make sure that the wider jumps membership benefits through that as well. So the benefits will be felt far and wide within the PJA. Yes, some people say, well, look, the big prizes are only going to the top. I mean, the reality is, the sponsor was really keen for those big eye-catching, headline-grabbing prizes, and rightly so.
That makes total sense.
Yeah,
it makes total sense.
And ultimately, it's professional elite sport.
Yeah,
and look, and I'm not being remotely disparaging or rude to any of my members, but if you're a footballer in Division 2, your salary is not the same as what it is if you're playing in the Premier League, and it's so look, that is why that structure is the way it is. And I think if through all that enhanced media work, just the competition itself, if it does become a genuine headline generator, and based on Flutter's own research, if this drives engagement, it drives viewership, it drives betting on the sport, then everyone through the sport will ultimately feel the benefits of that. And yeah, I genuinely, as much as if you're hardcore racing fans, I understand why they would say, well, I don't care. I've just backed a horse in a race and that's what I care about in a race. I don't care which jockeys where in the championship. But if you've got a new generation interested in the sport, or a younger generation interested in the sport who are interested, then
well, the reason I asked you now, how do you see horse racing? Is it through the prism of horses, or because you have a relationship with the jockeys, do you actually are you invested in the personalities behind it? I think, and this is we discussed, Full Gallop Champions, the documentary, right? Like, I would love to know more about these guys sitting on the horses. I would love to know, like, what they eat, what they don't like, what their social, like, I would love to know the people behind, I guess, the colors, right? And I think, the first documentary didn't really do that. And I think if this is an incentive and maybe with a fresh approach for a second series, and actually give us the people behind racing, I think then that can be great. AK, you wanted to come in there? Sorry,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're a jockey, I think you need to bow down at the church of Paul Struthers, to be honest with you, because a month ago, Paul's getting called into meetings. He's looking around for an owner's rep. He can't see one. The jockeys are gonna get the lot. I think you've probably played an absolute blinder, to be honest with you. I can't see the reach and how you're gonna get
I can see it, AK.
how are you
I
gonna
can
get a
see
million
it.
and a half quid's worth of interest out of this. I can't see it. The jockeys have got the lot, I think, and I think it's great for them. I don't resent them at all. Great for Flutter putting the money in.
Yeah.
But yeah,
The only problem, the problem with this is like there's an oxymoron here. Like, racing, right, does not lend itself to being open and transparent. It just doesn't, right? And like everybody who's invested in racing and knows about it, like TC will tell you, like it's not whisper the ground. If you speak, you're almost shunned in racing, right? And therefore, like I guess when I'm looking at this agreement and I'm looking at the promises and I'm looking what's required of the jockeys, I'm kind of going, well, that's great, but like there's an omerta there. There's an omerta that exists in racing. Trainers, jockeys, whatever. If you talk too much, you're gone, right? And I just wonder, can the two things marry each other well, Paul? And do we get something that is entertaining, that is actually authentic, without being just lip service to a contract?
It's a challenge, that element, Hugh. You're right, and Anthony, I don't really deserve much credit for this at all. I mean, it was Flutter and RMG did the bulk of the work. In terms of the documentary, I know they're still waiting for the final confirmation that it's 100% going ahead, but they have started filming.
Yes. Yeah.
And there is hope that it will get fully greenlit financially very, very soon. Now, coming back to something that I think you talked about last week, at no point was I ever told that if the Jockey Cup doesn't happen, the documentary's not going ahead. That was never anything that was on the table with me. I think there is obviously, I think there's a benefit. There is this desire for a narrative. I personally, because I devour sport, I love sports documentaries. Even sports I'm not interested in, I love watching documentaries.
Yeah.
And the last one, and the jockeys and loads of trainers as well, they real leap of faith to allow that level of access they allowed last year. And I thought the first two episodes were really good. We all knew what had happened in the King George, but I thought they did an amazing job of it. And then I thought the second episode was really interesting. But you were just there kind of feeling they were only scratching the surface. And like the other documentaries that really grab you, you know what the characters are like, not just in the changing room, but also trainers and stuff. And I think this year, so take Charlie winning on Saturday.
Yeah.
I know they followed Charlie last year and did some filming with him.
On Saturday.
Sorry, Paul's not happy with that answer.
So they filmed Charlie last year, but because the documentary started so late, so their first day of filming was at Kempton on King George Day, and then did Charlie get injured, or he'd ridden a lot of winners leading up to then, and then the rest of the season just didn't go quite as it had started. I can't remember why. So Charlie, like a few other jockeys who they followed, ended up on the cutting room floor and never made it in. But with some of the things Charlie's gone through, that would make genuinely fascinating viewing. So I think if between a second series of the documentary and the Jockey Cup and this media access and the new initiatives that will be trialed, I genuinely think it could have a really positive effect.
Is there a trust issue, Paul? Do you think
between who?
Between jockeys and perhaps the media? Is there a trust issue, like as in like I don't want to say an inability to let themselves go, but I guess a reluctance to show who they really are.
So the trust issue, yes, because if you're letting people in to the changing room and there's cameras in there all day, then and you don't know at that time what's going to make it into the documentary, then last year was a massive leap of faith, but it has really helped with that trust issue because of the output. So there was nothing in there that embarrassed anyone or stitched anyone up or anything like that. So there's that. I think there is probably, and there was element of this with the ROA's response, which in part I understood because I know sometimes you have to speak to your membership through the media, but there is still a hierarchy in racing. There is still a hierarchy, and I think that less of a trusted issue and just being more mindful of I don't know how to put this with it whilst being diplomatic, of just jockeys not getting too big for their boots.
Yes.
Frankly.
We're hitting that point where you need to redo your mic because you're dialecting.
It was gone.
Okay, are we back in? Are we back in?
Sure.
Yeah.
That might be a good moment to move on, you, because
Yeah, okay.
honestly, that was brilliant stuff. But
Yeah, no, I could talk about this all day, but you know what? Just to finish on this, okay? Just to finish on this, right? Like, I think I was quite dismissive last week about this because I just thought, oh, Jesus Christ, you know, like, what is this going to do to bridge the gap between what the punter is viewing and what actually is happening behind the scenes? But like, Paul, you know, if there can be a kind of relationship there now, and if the jockeys can kind of understand that, look, if we speak our mind or if we open ourselves up, we're not going to get pilloried to a certain degree. And I'm not talking about giving inside secrets away, but just give us a bit of yourself. If that can happen, I think you know, the whole project could actually do a lot of good. But look, we'll wait and see. And look, it was fascinating to hear your insight there. So thank you so much for that. Right, okay. Constitution Hill. Is he dead, Tony?
Well, the good thing is the lameness could be 3 days worth of on the side, 3 days worth of on the sidelines, or 3 weeks. I just think it's getting quite a pretty sorry tale now, isn't it? It's a horse that's probably the best horse that probably I've seen in recent years, and it's get to the stage now where people just view it as becoming tiresome. It's the horse has clearly had a lot more problems than has been advertised, and I just think, you know, it's getting to a stage now whereby it's, you know, people are just kind of like not caring about the horse because it's just incessant.
It's a total farce. It's a total farce. And if you're the betting company attached to that yard, just fucking rein it in now. Did
you trade anything on that racecourse gallop, AK, in regards to Champion Hurl, the fighting fifth?
Yeah, we had it up, and we just wanted to see the first couple of bets coming through. I think if you're watching it, and I think James Knight, who's the head of horse racing trading, I think at N10, I think he made the point that if you just literally had to look at the body language of connections and trainers and jockeys after that. It was obvious anyway, wasn't it? I know nothing about horse racing.
Just trust your eyes.
Just look, and I think just from a body language point of view, like he was any price, wasn't it?
I would make 2 points here. Yeah. I think there's a big disconnect between the racing press and media and followers of the sport and punters of the sport. You know, they just took Nicky Henderson's line and Nico de Boinville's line.
And Nico's.
Yeah. Like I said, I do some work with Nico, but
I know that's fine.
Staying away from that at all. What they were saying was clearly odds against of what we saw with our own eyes, as you said.
It's the polar opposite of what we saw.
So I just think what was reported by the press was literally the Nicky Henderson, Nico de Boinville angle. You know, first gallop on soft ground of the year. But
they're just PR agencies, then, aren't they? They're just PR agencies. Like, they should actually have comment rather than just like regurgitating quotes. Like, it should actually be comment.
And, you know, there's a guy out there, Stephen Harris. He went up there and said, "I've heard they're waiting on the vets in the lorry. I think it will be retired." And that is. He said he heard it from 2 different people. You take that with a pinch of salt. That is Twitter. That is X. But then Greg Wood came on, the Guardian racing correspondent. I've got loads of time for him. He's a great operator. He actually made a bizarre comment, said, "I hope you're not getting involved on Betfair." You know, actually preposterous kind of like these claims, because there's a 2-year maximum jail sentence for cheating at gambling. I just thought, no, Greg, just get a grip. And the only other thing I would say about this, about Nicky Henderson coming out and say the horse is kind of like lame, that horse had been lame for 48 hours previously. And I contacted someone at Unibet and I just said, are you aware of the Betfair movements on the Fighting Fifth? You probably might need to address this or whatever. It was all very reactive. You don't get the drift on Betfair, you don't get the lame news coming from Constitution Hill. And if again, it's not a BHA knocking exercise here, but if I was a BHA, I would have put out a statement saying, we are aware of the drift of Constitution Hill. We will be looking into this as a matter of course. Just come out and just say it. They will be doing it behind the scenes, find out who was laying the horse for the Fighting Fifth. They will be, but just so come out and say it.
Can I give you the layman's view, my view, right? And plenty of people like me, right? Look, just like fans of sport, punters who want to watch and see what's going on here. So we watched the racecourse gallop, and Sergino, without breaking sweat, absolutely canters all over Constitution Hill, who is huffing and puffing and just laboured in every single stride that he does. After the gallop, Nicky Henderson goes, oh, that was perfect. That was great. That was exactly what we wanted to see. He had a good old blow. He'll come on a lot from that. That was great. Nico de Boinville gets off the horse. He's interviewed. Well, that's exactly what we want. Yeah, I just asked him to go, and yeah, he was a bit tired maybe because he's race fit, but he was a bit tired. But like Sergino's going, why? And this is the thing, right? And I feel sorry for Nicky Henderson at the moment. I do. If they had come out and said, "Oh Jesus, that wasn't what we wanted to see. That was not what we expected to see of this horse," they would have everybody's attention and they would have everybody's support. The two of them came out and basically said, don't believe, punters, what you have just seen with your very own eyes, because we are telling you the opposite is true. And the opposite wasn't true. And I just find that hard to stomach.
Yeah, but just before we move on, obviously, time restraints, etc. on this. But it's obviously you have to view this, to use your kind of like, prism kind of like reference. I have some sympathy with the racing media who come out and don't question that line because they have to deal with Nicky Henderson, they have to deal with Nico, every day of the week.
No, but I don't ask the fucking question.
I don't. No,
but it's quite insightful that the only good piece I've read about that, again, from Richie Forrestal, consistently the most honest and best writer out there.
Brilliant.
He's brilliant. He really is brilliant.
But he is in Ireland. He's detached from the Henderson, this circus around Constitution Hill, and he can say it as it is. The likes of some of the articles I read about that gallop and the fallout from it wasn't journalism.
This is the problem.
Yeah, I don't have any sympathy, Tony, to be honest with you. You tell the truth or you just be a parrot, basically. I think it's just really, really poor. It's the one thing I do like about the exchange, to be honest with you, is it often tells the truth. It tells you the truth more than the words of connections will tell you the truth. So I people who crow about drifts on exchanges and stuff like that, I quite like it. It's visibility that you won't see from people who talk. Basically, it's a positive.
Okay, if any of your staff came up to you and you asked them straight and they give you a full off answer, you just say forget it. Like forget it. Like what are you? Who is this guy? Like I don't understand. And you know what? As well, Nicky and Nico did more damage by the answers they gave in the aftermath of what we all saw to be the absolute truth. They did more damage to themselves than if they'd come and said, "Oh, Jesus."
I also think punters need to make their own decisions. If you're taking, it's one of the things we're talking about. Just the David Power Cup, more access to trainers and jockeys. I'd be more in favour of more access to people telling it as it is. That'd help a lot. What's the point of access if we're just going to all spout very safe lines and not tell?
I don't want access to mediocrity,
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Listen. Sorry, we're going to move on. JP McManus, writing in the Racing Post. TC, did you have an idea this was coming? So look, it was a very interesting piece. He made a lot of strong points about the handicaps, the amount of runners that are being allowed at Cheltenham. and also, I guess, the barrier to entry for horses that can get into it. Overall, what did you make of this? Did you think he had a point, or did you think he was self-serving?
Yeah, I just another like again, we're going to have to deal with all the subjects quite snappily now because we've gone on justifiably. But
the Washington Redskins, or the Commanders as they're now known, they'll be going into overtime.
Don't give the result away. What I would say here is basically this was a ghosted piece by Lee Mottershead, by JP McManus. He made some valid points about the kind of like uncompetitiveness in the run up to Cheltenham, but for him to say he wants some races the maximum fields reduced by 8 and 6 in the handicaps, I think was a little bit self-serving. And also, there was one news line from that piece, and Andrew Mount was our first questioner back on Tuesday after he read this, and he spat out his cornflakes. There was a line in there. We won't go deep into this, but there was a line in there that stood out a mile, and when I sent it around to the group, I actually bolded up. JP McManus said in this article, we need people to show their hand more, which journalistically should have been the kind of like flag of that piece. I listened out for Lee Mottershead with on Nick Luck Daily, and I thought, right, that is clearly the line that the idea to go with. It wasn't even mentioned once. I just thought
talking about Charles Burns, was he?
Yeah, I thought it was quite like he made some very good points in there, JP McManus.
Yes, I thought so.
And obviously, when you get these ghosted piece, you do a deal with the devil, and that's just not references JP. That is just if you get a very prominent figure who wants to put something out there, very newsworthy.
I know JP did the deal with the devil. The devil in this case being Lee.
You have to let them have free reign. But yeah, and he made some good points about the actual weights jockeys carry. But
yeah,
but for that line not to be fleshed out subsequently, and it was Tom Stanley doing it on Nick Luck Daily. It wasn't actually Nick himself, but I just thought it was strange. But
I'm saying absolutely nothing. I want tickets to the Ryder Cup at Adare, man.
Yeah.
I'm saying
nothing. Do you see, listeners? Do you see what we have to? Tony Calvin is our editor on the show. He basically decides what goes on. Like, this is what we have to put up with here. Like, he is an absolute stickler for this kind of stuff.
You said yourself the sweet spot for any podcast is an hour.
Correct. Right. Very, very briefly, Paul, and I need to ask you about this before we go to questions. Last week at Linfield, 10-day bans, guys, fresh off the press, if you like, very young in their career. I think most people can separate the incident at Linfield last Tuesday and the participants involved, the jockeys involved, with, say, a grade 1 or whatever like that. But how did you view the incident itself? And I guess, do you think that the punishment handed out was fair in the end? And overall, were you happy enough with how it was dealt with?
Yeah, look, it's a training race, and so the clue's in the name, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
It's young jockeys at the start of their career, learning their trade and their profession. And look, the way the rules are structured, the rules say this, and this is the penalty range, and this is the entry point penalty. So to be fair, I think Fergus Sweeney was the main steward on duty that day. I think if that would have been for full professional jockeys, they'd have been suspended at the top of the range. But the stewards did at least take into account it was inexperience and in a training race. So look, no one wants to see someone suspended for 10 days, but look, they're the rules. And yeah, it's they'll learn more from. But the reality is, ultimately, I think that as individuals, once they get through it, they'll learn more from that than
exactly.
Than not.
I think most people are awake to that. Like you're not. I totally understand, and I think there was a lot of empathy there that maybe wouldn't have been there if you were looking at the Derby or whatever. So yeah, I totally understand that.
It's interesting. We got a question on that about the severity of the bans, actually, but we'll come on to the questions now.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go through these very quickly, guys, because we are over time. So Big J wants to know: can Shoot First win the World Hurdle? Well, I'll take this, Big J. He absolutely can win the World Hurdle if Charles Burns has backed him at the appropriate price. If he doesn't get the price, I don't think he's going to win. That's just my view. That's just my view. Stuart Ackerson wants to know, has the gravy train killed off proper racing journalism? Well, absolutely. Sure, look at us here. Like, I mean, we think AK is an absolute legend. Tony throws rose petals in front of him whenever he walks in the morning. Like, you know what I mean? We go where the money goes, TC, don't we?
Yeah, well, if I'm in his bedroom and he's coming in and I'm robing, then I'm running, mate. Don't worry. And if I was in his bedroom, he'd be running as well, I would imagine.
If you were in his bedroom, he'd be in the wrong bedroom with right. Stephen Holm wants to know, I know you'll all be discussing Constitution Hill, but surely keeping Sergino over hurdles is a sign in itself that it's not just a small issue and Constitution Hill could be back for Kempton. And how have the Donnellys not stepped in, seeing as they have the reigning champion hurdler? Well, I mean, Sergino looked very, very good, but I mean, I guess, you know, we're asking what was it against? Like, how are we comparing the run? I mean, look, I don't know.
It's, you know, Sergino was earmarked to make his chasing debut at Kempton tomorrow.
Yes.
Obviously, he's not. He scored brilliantly. But all of a sudden he's going for the fighting fifth. So I think he's a proper top notcher.
Yeah.
But if he wins the fighting fifth in a procession, you know, they've got a decision to make, haven't they? And
I think Mystical Power is going to travel over as well for Willie, so that'll make it a test. You know, like it's not going to be a walk in the park. But I will be all over Lossiemouth for the champion hurdle. Lossiemouth, the next Annie Power. You heard it here first. What price, AK? Come back to us next week. Right. Ahead of the handicapper says, what platform is the best in terms of form, stats, all-round data, etc. Racing Post time for you said the Racing Post website recently, TC, was very good, so I think we'll stick with that. David Brown, like to know Paul's view on whether the 28 days is in view a reasonable punishment for dropping hands. Have the PGA discussed it as being too harsh? My view is if you're an amateur or an apprentice, it should be half the amount of professional due to them only starting out. Yeah, Paul's just gone as I write that question, but I think he
I'm still here. I just had to turn my camera off.
Oh yes, okay, no worries.
It was coming up that my connection was unstable, which is better than me being unstable.
So briefly, Paul, like, do you think there should differentiate between amateur and professional in terms of the punishments handed
out? The reason they use suspensions rather than fines for jockeys is because it's equitable. I.e., if you're Ryan Moore, it's going to cost you, but it will cost you the equivalent at your level, whoever you are. I think 28 days for dropping hands. I mean, bearing in mind, dropping your hands is a mistake. I remember reading David Jennings' article because we had a space, it's typical, isn't it? London buses. We had 2 or 3 within the space of 2 or 3 weeks where jockeys had dropped their hands and either lost first and were found in breach or weren't found in breach. 28 days, it's a serious mistake. I think 28 days is too much for a mistake. And I certainly thought David Jennings' suggestion that you ban someone for 3 months for a mistake. You could ban them for a year, but people will still make mistakes. When it's a mistake, it's a mistake. Yes. So look, like all these things, when it comes to penalties, we do have regular meetings with the BHA around them, and we can put forward for changes to penalties. Realistically, when we know that that's one of those penalties that we're probably not going to get changed because of, understandably, you know, punters, owners, trainers, if you drop your hands and cost a placing, then lots of other people are losing out. And whilst it's a mistake and hasn't been done on purpose, it's the consequence of doing so.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for stepping into the considerably large boots of our very own Perry Mason Matlock, who's taking the week off here. Bert Doncaster says,
I think he turned his camera off because he just saw the Washington result and he just fainted.
Yeah, well, maybe so. Bert Doncaster says, I've been charged with murder, was found standing over the victim, covered in blood with a knife in my hand. How is Harry going to get me off this one? Well, I tell you what, Bert, if anyone can do it, Harry can do it. My thanks to AK, to Tony Calvin, to Paul. Paul, have a great season. We'll talk to you soon, hopefully. And best of luck with everything to come in the future. And listen, I'll keep an eye out for Washington. I'm a Buffalo Bills fan myself. It goes back to OJ Simpson. Don't mention that to Harry, otherwise we get into all sorts of trouble. Right, guys, thanks for listening as always. We'll talk to you next week. Good luck.